Yes. Hello, welcome to episode 3, Get Gooderer or Return of the Good, depending on which one you want it to be. Basically, it's a bunch of us mods talking for about an hour and some change about how to get good and get better at what you're doing. For those participants who are here, feel free to send any and all questions to chat and we'll start getting them. So I am going to go around the room and we're all going to explain who we are and why we should be on this panel. And the last time I tried to do this, I was trying to basically get people to brag about themselves, about why they are the badasses in the SCA. And hold on a second, I'm going to, wait, hide video, stop video, there we are. So what I'm going to do is I would like you to brag a little bit about yourselves so that way the people who are listening in will be like, yes, I should be listening to those people. So, we even have a master, Connor has shown up, but I think he's going to be quiet. Anyway, so that was unexpected. There go my commentary. So for everyone who just joined in, this is being recorded. Please put your questions in chat and we will happily answer all of them. And then we're going to go around the room or around the Zoom and say who we all are. Please go ahead and mute your mics. I'm going to mute a couple people who did not mute themselves. There we go, when they first came in. And there we are. So we should just have those of us who are, wait, I might have muted people that didn't need to be muted. There we go. But when you want to talk and you're a mod, please go ahead and unmute yourselves. So, all right, I think we've got enough going on at this point, so we'll just get started. And I want everyone to just introduce themselves. So, Brigid, please introduce yourself and explain why you are a badass and people should listen to you.
Hi, I'm Brigid. I've been fencing since I think 1998 or so. And my very first tournament I entered, I won. I then stomped around the mid-realm to grab the iron ring, and I grabbed it 4 times before I became a bronze ring. If you look in the old books, it will just say Brigid was here really big on a page. People wrote poetry. There is a poem that has been written about me stalking the iron ring of the mid-realm, which was recited in court. Nice. I was on the Pentic Champions team 6 or 7 times. Most of them I have won. And I was one of the Kingdom Champions of the Middle at one point in time. And then I moved to the East Kingdom. Oh, and I was the General of the Middle Kingdom for 3 or 4 Gulf Wars. Then I moved to the East Kingdom and made it to Sweet 16 of a couple Kings and Queens Rapier. And did pretty well out there, and also was bestowed upon the Order of the Golden Rapier, or the Ogre as we know it. And then I again got laid off and had to move. And so I moved out to Seattle and came out here and started fighting in all of the QRCs and made it to my first QRC with Sweet 16, having just moved to the kingdom. Then I was made a white scarf of on tier. I think I don't suck.
Right, you do not suck. All right, Effingham.
Hi, I am Thomas of Effingham, or Effing Thomas. I have actually been doing this longer than I thought as I started to do math, because my first event was a week before Illidor got her white scarf.
I authorized you.
He authorized me, and it was in like 2005 or 6. whatever. Felix was king of the mid. I had never met him at that point, and then I decided I wanted to be good at this much more than I wanted to be recognized for it. And you will see that usually in my internet presence, where I also seem to have a casual disregard for manners. I've gotten better. But yes, I've been on the champions team at Penzic for the East and the Mid, and I'm still undefeated in singles champs team appearances, which I'm really happy with. I've done well in the East Kingdom Kings and Queens tournament. Other fun highlights included taking away the Iron Ring of the East from Donovan after he held it for like 2 or 3 years or something stupid to get that back in circulation. And even though it's not entirely true, a lot of people credit me with bringing a plague of longswords into SCA normal fencing instead of just cut and thrust. I would actually blame Marco Borromei for that. So
I agree with both of that sentiment, both of them. ATN.
Okay, well, I am the poster old man for persistence, is why I think I'm here. I started fencing in the SCA in 1987. I lived in a barony that not only had no fencers, but basically actively hated it. It was a barony full of Vikings and Celts. I was fortunately an hour and a half from Bringelad, where all the fencing happened. And I started driving to practice twice a week, going to Bringelad to learn how to fence, and taking that back home to Bjornsborg, which has more than its share of mods now. I was persistent. I got my white scarf in 93. Then around 2002, got injured to the point that I didn't think I could fight anymore, and discovered, much to my shock and honest shock, that the SCA wasn't fun if I couldn't fight. And I had a small child at the time, and I just decided, no, this was fun, but it's not for me anymore. I'm going away. And I went away for about 7 years. And when I came back, everything had changed. There were no foils and épées anymore. It was all heavy rapiers. And I had discovered that indeed I could still fence. I wanted to fence. I had this thing on my arm though, which I was now worried about embarrassing if I went out on the field using swords I was not familiar with. So I had to train my butt off to get to where I thought a Don should be fighting wise, so that I didn't embarrass my scarf. And thankfully by that point I was living in an area with a really, really great practice. I think we had like 4 consecutive On-Store and Queens champions in a row come out of our practice. Brigid's husband was there at the time, Alessandro, who's in Atlantia now. And they beat me up and got me good enough to where I felt like I could be, okay, I can go out and play Don again. And in my first Queens, I beat this kid named John Drake, and that was nice. He was only 16, so I was beating up a teenager, but, and then I managed to get hurt again because of bad body mechanics. Mm-hmm. And decided, okay, well, I've got other things to do in the SCA. I'm not quitting this time, but I can't fence. Got in a car wreck that fixed the bad shoulder, pure luck. And about that time, the MOD was coming in, and it took me a while, and I decided, yeah, I want to do that. When I decided I wanted to do that, I was 54 years old and had not been fencing seriously for 2 years at that point. And I had several people say, well, okay, you've got all of these other qualities, but your fighting is not there. So persistence, spite, I can tell the spite story, but that's a different one. Basically, I was not, when Onstera started picking mods, I wasn't on the radar. I definitely wasn't one of the low-hanging fruit. I had to decide in my mid-50s, this is what I want to do, and get there and work with whoever I could to get me there. So
All right. Mercedes.
Hi, I'm Mercedes Vera de Calafia. I live in the East Kingdom. I joined the SCA in 1977. I discovered fencing in 1991 after having been discouraged fighting heavy. He said women aren't really welcome. So I started fencing in the East and got good enough that eventually I became an ogre. They made me East Kingdom Rapier Marshal. And then I kind of made a left turn, became Kingdom Seneschal because I figured somehow I was a good leader. So when the mod happened, I was not fencing at all. I was Kingdom Seneschal, and when I stepped down, I felt like fencing had passed me by. So like Etienne, I said, okay, I'm in my late 50s. I'm gonna get there by sheer force of will. So I rebuilt my body and my fencing, and I've been a mod for 1.5 years, and I think I'm pretty good. If you don't think so, you know, we'll meet on the list.
Nice, good answer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, the next thing we're going to talk about is like, how did you get good? So I'm going to talk about me just very slightly. Some people have already heard this. My name's Illidor de Bettigrain. I'm your benevolent dictator / moderator and also the mod. I've been Kingdom champion 5 times. I do not remember the number of champs fights that I have been in. I've won more than I have lost. And I am currently the Iron Ring holder of Ethelmark, and I've held it for 1 year, and you guys need to come get it off me. That's what I'm saying. As soon as fighting starts to happen again, Ethelmark, come get some. That's what I'm going to say. So the first question I said is everyone is like, the question is how did you get good? And so I want to talk a little bit about that on my end. What I did very quickly were 2 things. 2 things really helped me. One was I knew because I'd played basketball in my younger years. So I didn't start fencing till I was 31. Oops, we lost Effingham. Hopefully he'll come back. So I lost my, I think he just lost his video. I was
trying to tactfully get a drink.
Okay, that's fine. Go get it. It's fine. Go forth and get a drink. I ended up, 2 things really worked for me. One, because I knew basketball, I knew that practice and lots of practice would get me to where I wanted. And that included drills as well as going and getting as much fighting in as I could. And the other one was spite. Pure and utter spite, like you could also call it determination, right? But really spite was a big motivator for me, right? Just to keep me going and keep me fighting. There's a lot, and there's a third one. The third one is I still really like winning. I really like it. It is a big motivator for me. I don't like losing, but I like winning more than I don't like losing. So I keep active and try and continue to figure out ways to beat all those young whippersnappers that believe speed is the answer. So, all right, who wants to talk about how they got good? All right, Etienne, I want you to talk.
All right, I'm going to go on the spite story.
All right.
Because this is a good one. This was after I had kind of decided to myself, this is kind of what I want to do, and I'd started practicing fairly regularly again. And I was on a long drive, we have a lot of those in Onsteora, to a coronation, with a cadet who was in her late 20s. And it's, you know, about a 5-hour drive to the site and another 30 minutes once you get on site to get to the site. So we're talking fencing in the wee hours of the morning and talking about, you know, just who she considers good, where, you know, what you do when you're talking on the road. And she makes a comment to me saying, when my friends and I are talking about the fencers and who's good and who's top 10 or whatever, if we talk about you, we kind of have this category we call broken. And by that, what I mean is when I watch you fence, I can see how good you must have been 25 years ago.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm just sitting there with a smile on my face in the car thinking, oh girl. And that conversation probably fueled me for the next 6 months. It got me through the tourney season where I found myself in the final 16 of an on-store in Queens for the first time since my 20s. It pushed me, long enough and hard enough until practice and thinking about fencing and doing little things like doing 20 minutes of footwork at work at the office every day became a habit.
Okay. Habits are good. Mercedes, did you have a comment that you wanted to say?
Yeah. So I have never been athletic. My athleticism in high school was band and drama, and that was it. So when I started fencing, I was 30 years old. I had no background in anything remotely physical. But I started trying to break down fencing into essential pieces. So I knew my arms had to be in good shape. So I worked on that. I knew I had to do footwork. I knew that I had to work on cardio. I knew that I had to have strong legs and thighs. So I used all of the pieces physically to put together a athletic person that I've become. So one thing that I learned back in the 90s that has kept with me is you will see a lot of people have a very natural athleticism to them. And I don't remember who said it, but there are a lot of people who are born on third base and think they've hit a triple. And you watch them and they have this amazing natural skill. I never had that. I had to work for every piece of skill that I could muster. So I got good by working really freaking hard.
Right. Effingham, what's your story?
I feel like mine is a cautionary tale of spite and repeatedly breaking yourself, much like many other people's are. Like when I started, I got into this because of Colin McNish, who many of you know. I was his roommate and we were both bouncers at a goth club. And he started dragging me to fight practices where I was 5'7" and using a 36-inch like oval schlager, and everyone else at my practice except for like Eleanor O'Malley, was like 6'1", because it was McNish and Witt and Darius Lowen and a bunch of those guys who all had like 42s and 45s. So I'm this short dude who can't reach anybody, and I spent 2 years beating my head against that wall as hard as I could, becoming especially spiteful of anybody taller than me. So it sort of became my mission that if you were tall, I was going to hit you in the face somehow. And I got a lot of good coaching from McNish and Sir William of Fairhaven, who's not like primarily a fencer at all, but gives good martial pursuit advice. And he basically put it to me that no matter who else you travel with, whoever your road companions are, none of that actually matters. Doesn't even matter how supportive your spouse or significant other is. This is ultimately a solitary pursuit, and you have to want it. And you're either at practice getting better or you're not. So there was a good period of a few years when I lived in Ohio where I was doing a practice in Dayton, Ohio, a practice in Cincinnati, Ohio, and a practice in Columbus, Ohio every week, and then going to events on weekends. Brigid might remember a whole bunch of times that I was coming down to Cincinnati and fighting with like her and Ulrich damn near every week.
Yep.
And more practice, more travel, all of that was seen as more good. And at the time, I was entirely doing it for spite reasons of just figuring out anything I could to beat anybody who stood in front of me. And I basically was doing that until I hit a wall. And I didn't realize how hard I just hit that wall and kept running at it until I moved from the Middle Kingdom to the East. Where ultimately, while I have a lot of really good friends in the Mid, I found, we'll say, my tribe out in the East, especially attitude-wise. But it was after that that I realized, you know, you can throw yourself as hard as you want at going to practice every day of every week, but if you're not actually getting anything out of that practice, it's not really also doing you any good.
Right.
So that sort of became my transition when I moved out here in like 2011. I probably kept hitting that wall because I distinctly remember moving out here and telling Natalia and Ogedai at a practice over in Millbury, Massachusetts, it was like, I don't really know any of you people, but I'm here to stab as many motherfuckers as I can until you put me on the champions team. Point me at who needs to die and I'm going to make it happen until I get there. And instead of, you know, pearl clutching, which I sort of was expecting, which is what I would have probably gotten in the Mid or many other places, Ogedai and Natalia were like, okay, so you need to go to this event and kill these motherfuckers. Then you got to go here, and there's roses, and then there's, you know, Genu. Basically, get to every region of the East, find anybody wearing an ogre pin, and just make sure they know that you're not to be trifled with. And that was when I started substituting an abundance of practice for a quality of practice and actually having a focus and a goal to drive me towards that. And some of this also comes out of that spite, recovery, and injury thing because I'm just numerically younger than a lot of people for as the level of broken that I am, thanks to, like, you know, construction accidents that like almost cut you in half, and then, you know, they tell you things like you're probably not going to walk again, and you decide that that's bullshit because of spite. I don't necessarily recommend that as a primary force, and that people should learn from some of the mistakes of those of us who have done that. Yeah, just piles of practice early on, develop a lot of like that core of prowess, and then being able to, instead of just continually dumping water into that bucket, being able to then focus and drive that in an actual useful direction later helped.
All right, Brigid, what about you? Do you have a story, or do you want another question?
Oh no, that's fine. I've totally got a story.
Okay.
So I started fencing when I was a teenager, and I had just moved to Cincinnati, and it was the first time away from anywhere, you know, so the SCA quickly became a substitute for my family, my friends, everything. And I first I refused to fence. And I was like, I won't like fencing. I don't want to fence. That's just not for me. I would never want to fence. And Gooderer, who is the marshal of the practice, kept trying to convince me that I should totally try fencing. And I was an art student, and so why buy food when you can buy paint? And so at the time, then they decided to host a cookout for the fencers, and they were like, you should come, we'll have lots of food. And I was like, oh, food, I like food. I will always show up for free food. And so I showed up to this practice and brought some beer, and they were like, well, the food's not ready yet, but go ahead and put on some gear and try it. And I was like, I've been tricked. And so I put on gear, and I was like, I don't want to do this. This is stupid. I won't want to fight. And so I was afraid to hit someone with a sword. I'd never done any martial activity before this, so I was afraid of how hard do you hit someone? Am I going to hurt someone? Is it going to hurt if I get hit? When a sword would come at my face, I would blink and like cringe and like turtle up, and I hated everything. And so it didn't really work out well for me. And so I had that bratwurst and beer, and then I was like, let me try that again. And so I tried it again, and I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And so I because I was a teenager, I still was fast and agile and not broken anywhere. And so, and so I was doing pretty well. And I was like, this is a lot of fun. And so I went to my first event and I got authorized, my first event as a fencer. I'd been in the SCA for some time, like probably about 5 or 6 years at that point. My first event as a fencer, I got authorized, and I go to sign into the tourney, and I go out and I fight all my fights, and the marshal comes back and goes, who won the tournament? And they're like, Brigid. And I'm like, Brigid? And they're like, yeah, you didn't lose to anyone. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't lose to anyone? And they're like, yeah, you didn't lose to anyone. And so, and I won a dagger out of that tournament. So then I went forth and tried to figure out how to use my dagger. And it took me 45 minutes to get authorized with my dagger because I was afraid to use it. And so fast forward several years later, and I was going to 3 to 4 practices a week. I was going to an event every single weekend. I got my marshalate in 4 weeks' time of all of the signatures you needed for everything. Went to Penzig, went to Gulf Wars, came back, and I was like, this is the best time ever. And all I wanted to do is fight after that. And so that was pretty awesome, but I wouldn't listen to people if they wanted to teach me something. They had to kick my butt. And if they kicked my butt, then I was like, oh, I will listen to you. What practice do you go to? What event do you go to? I want time with you. You're going to show me how you beat me. And so I would show up and I would demand time from this person after the tourney, before the tourney, like, you know, the day we're cleaning up. I'd be like, I need you to show me how you beat me. Like, I need to understand this. And please let's work together so that you can show me and I can learn something. And so one of my favorite stories from this, I went to a Rose tournament and the Iron Ring thing. Right before the Rose tournament, the king, Valharic, had showed up with his champion, Duke Rangvalder. And I was kind of annoyed because it was one of the few court positions that a fencer could hold. And so I was like, oh, this Rattan guy, whatever. I didn't know Rangvalder at the time. He's an amazing fencer. He's an amazing fighter. And by the way, if you get a chance to hear him out, you should hear him anytime. So he goes to hold the field. And I am annoyed because I want the field for my Iron Ring map out. And I'm an impatient teenager. And so I'm shoving people in line to go fight Duke Rangvalder. And I roll up on him and I said, are you ready? And he goes, yeah. And I go, are you sure? And he goes, yeah. And I took a step and stabbed him in the neck with a dagger and walked off. And I was just kind of bullshit about it. And so then we're headed to the Rose tournament. And I don't know any Roses. I don't know any Queens. I don't know anyone who does this because I'm a party person in the SCA. And so I talked to the only Viscountess I know. And I'm like, oh, can you sponsor me? And she goes, no, I'm sponsoring Rangvalder. And I was like, what? That guy? So I go up to the tournament, and they have a tournament before the tournament, so you can go and fight, and then the Roses who don't have anyone yet can pick people who are available. And Rangvalder, who's already picked, is standing at the entrance of the list because you cannot challenge down in OP, and he's a Duke. Right. So I roll up on him. I'm like, hey, Your Grace, about that fight. And he's like, sure. Boom. And we go out on the field. And it was best of 5 touches. And he goes, are you ready? And I go, yeah. And he goes, are you sure? And I go, yeah. And he stabbed me 5 times before I blinked.
Oh, no.
And I was like, what? Good. And then he goes to bow, and he goes, you're supposed to bow lower because you lost. And I was like, oh, I have to learn from this guy. He's amazing. And so that's just one of the sort of things where I was like, you gave me a piece of humble pie. I must now come learn from you. Yes. And so I drove up to Detroit just to be like, hey, if I drive to Detroit, will you put on fencing armor and will you teach me? And he's like, sure. I don't get asked that very often. I'm like, great. I will be there this weekend. Like, you know, and so that was kind of my habit of going around and finding people who could very heartily kick my butt and then learn from them.
I am in full agreement, by the way, of finding people who will kick your butt. That's why I would go to the Saints Within's Bog practice and have my butt kicked by the white scarves there. That helped get me good very quickly. So we have a couple of questions from our audience. And the first one is, I hear a lot of talk about motivators on why to fence and why to train. How do you find and encourage others to have this kind of self-motivation? Anyone?
Well,
Mercedes.
so you can't force someone to have that motivation. You have to find it within yourself. As most of us have, it's spite. It's, you know, my motivation is being better than last week, Mercedes. You know, I run, so I need to run a little bit further and a little bit faster than yesterday. When I fence, I need to do a little bit better against whoever than the last time. I don't know that it's possible to teach someone motivation. It's something that that comes from within.
Anyone else?
I mean, I just want to go out and fight and win. And these days, even if I don't go out and fight and win, I really just want to not embarrass myself. Like that's my current motivation, is don't embarrass yourself. But you know, I mean, yeah, Mercedes hit it right on the head. If you're not motivated, like maybe I don't understand the question, but if you're not motivated to get better, I don't know how you'd get better.
So,
Anyone else? Effingham?
yeah, that was one of those things that I called like a Sir William of Fairhaven epiphany, was that whole idea that martial excellence is a solitary pursuit, full stop. That motivation has to come from you. Other people can help you, but they may not be able to successfully motivate you. Other people can also hinder you. Like if you and your spouse are both fencers or both rattan fighters, and you know your significant other starts being like, well, practice is tonight, but that's far and Netflix is on, that can hold you back. The same way though, you can also be like, yeah, Netflix is on, too bad, fucker, get in the car, we're going to practice anyway. But like ultimately those decisions are all from you. And you know, you can help encourage people, but I don't think you can help motivate them. Like,
Yeah.
you can tell them, you know, look, if you go to a practice once a week and events on the weekends, you can expect to get your ABC grant level award in probably 15 years. You want to shave 5 years off that number? Go to practice twice a week for a couple of years, you know, and work on it that way. You want to shave even more time off that number? Go to 3 practices a week, go to a different event in a different region of your kingdom, get more experience with other people who aren't the same people you're fighting, and you'll shave more time off of that if they're motivated by pursuing that external sort of validation. If people are being motivated by like, I want to be on the champions team, okay, you can give them the list and like the empirical data of people who've been on the champions team before and basically be like, all right, go impress all of them. And if you can prove that you're winning more fights than they are, then it's kind of hard to ignore you for that. But you have to figure out the root cause of what's going to actually motivate someone themselves. You can lead a horse to water, but you can only beat it until it's embarrassed enough to do something on its own. It's not going to drink because you tell it to drink.
Right.
Anyone else?
Yeah. It's the same thing. I can encourage, I can't motivate. The motivation has to come from within.
So I'm going to slightly disagree with my colleagues on this, mostly because I think of it as, so I've had to take a lot of classes on, for on basically how to motivate employees in business. And there's like two theories. There's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then there's the two-factor theory of motivation, where there's demotivators, things that make you don't want to do your job. And then there's things that will, that are encourage you to do your job. And so the stuff that you guys are talking about is like the self-actualization, which is like at the very, very top of, no, Connor, Connor's texting me at this point, asking me if he wants to come in. No, you're coming in next week and you can do it from the goat pen. It'll be fine. So you guys are talking about self-actualization, where you have the motivation comes from the very top. You have become self-motivated to the point where you want to do it. But I also think that there's a number of levels before you get to the point where to keep fencing. And a lot of that involves like making sure you're with a group of people that you like spending time with, right? Like making sure that happens, that you're not, being with a group that you do not quite mesh with, or you don't like them, or they're being mean to you, right? That's definitely demotivator. Like definitely will demotivate you from fencing or wanting to fence with that group in particular. I also think that there are two things that the SCA does that helps with motivation. And one of them is awards, right? That is like when your boss says you're good job for you, like that's a good pat on the back. But also having your own peers say things that, hey, that you are good at this, or good job, or they want to be around you, or they think very highly of you. I think that is it. But the very top of it is the self-actualization, or your self-motivation to get there. And that one, I do agree, it comes within, but I do think you have to work through the other levels, right? Like being with a group of people that you like, and like to fence with, is a real big help to get you involved and keep you wanting to fence. Etienne had his finger up, and then we'll go to Brigid.
Yeah, so this actually ties a little bit to Master Aaron's class on inclusive practices last week, that if you are running a practice and you are making it welcoming to people, that you're not up against other things on their schedule, you're not making them choose between activities, if you're making it a positive environment for them to be in, that can be a motivator. If nothing else, it's an incentive that will drive them to, they want to go to practice, then you're not pushing them away.
Brigid.
I feel like there's a little bit of a difference between like the corporate world where you're getting paid for a job, and then this where we're doing this just out of fun. It's for funsies. And I'm trying to get, like when I was a cadet and I was a young cadet, I was hungry. I was so hungry, and all I wanted to do was get that bronze ring. And when I finally got that bronze ring, it's probably the award that meant the most to me in my entire SCA career, because I worked so hard, and it was so much, sweat, salt, and tears, to get there. I don't know. I guess I disagree. I think corporate life doesn't translate.
I think both can be true. And here is why. Because one, corporate life, that's your money, that's your bread and butter. But actually, as you guys were talking, and then you even said it, Brigid, the whole like, I was hungry. And I was like, actually, yeah, I remember one of my big motivators early on, and like in the little shire of Mugmort near Columbus, Ohio, the tourney prize used to be free signups for like you and +1 for feasts. That was one of the first tournaments I ever won. And when you get food, everybody else is dying now. So that Maslow's hierarchy thing of like, yeah, sometimes that can be a motivator that is good.
I'm a food motivated creature, so I speak of like,
that's why when you said you were hungry, I thought you were going there by like saying, no, a tourney prize once that was like awesome food. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll murder a whole bunch of people for food.
All right, Mercedes next.
One of the things that I really was hungry for was, as they say, to be in the room where it happens,
mm-hmm.
to be eventually head of fencing, to be head of the kingdom, and to get at the top and to be one of the people that makes the decisions. That motivated me a lot too, is to, write rules, write law. All of that was important to me.
So there we are. So one of the things that we got asked was, some of us young ones learn that speed isn't everything after injuries, LOL. So yeah, some of us learned that too. And so the question is along those lines, what is your best training method? I guess the question is along the lines of, when you get injured, what is the best training method for you to get back in?
Well, Philidor will tell you yoga. I wish I could get back into yoga. I have bad joints now at my age, which need to be replaced, and eventually I'll have that done and then get back into yoga. One of the things that I did, I have a bad knee, and I noticed that I was getting slow and ponderous, and that was a problem. So I started using an agility ladder to get my footwork back. I'm gonna turn my mic off because I have a big truck right outside my window.
No problem. It's all good. Brigid.
So it's curious because every time I've been injured, I come back and I fight like I think I remember I fought, which is actually different. And then people are like, "You're fighting totally differently," and I'm like, "Am I?" But the most recent injury, aside from concussions, and concussions just are time off. You just got to take the time. But my biggest one in recent years was the week after I got put on vigil for the Master of Defense. I tore this ligament right here in my elbow. And it was at a practice in Madrona, and I just tore it while training for QRC. And all I wanted to do was train for QRC, and I screamed when it happened. And I figured, okay, this is just a normal, like I hurt myself, whatever. I'll take 3 months off between now and QRC, ice it every day, do a little physical therapy, it'll be fine. And I showed up to that 12th night, and I entered the tournament, and I got to my second fight in and dropped my sword. And I was like, okay. So from that hotel, I withdrew from the tournament, from the hotel. I called my physical therapist, said no, called my doctor and said MRI Monday, like shoulder, elbow, all the stuff. And they found out, yes, I did in fact tear my elbow, but I also had like a severe amount of scar tissue all over my shoulder from all the times I ignored all of the injuries I had done to myself. And so I said, I need a good sports surgeon. I need someone who does golf or tennis, like specifically to do this. And so I went to the finest tennis surgeon in Seattle, and he was like, look, I can do the surgery right now and it'll be fine. And you'll be back to fencing in a few weeks. Or you can do it the hard way. Do you want to be fencing when you're 60 or not? And I was like, I want to be fencing when I'm 60. And he's like, great. You're not going to use that arm for anything. You are not going to turn a doorknob with it. You are not going to brush your teeth with that. Surefire way to put a toothbrush up your nose is to use your offhand. Just saying. And I went to physical therapy 3 times a week, every week for a year and a half. After that, and that got pricey, by the way. After that, my physical therapist finally fired me and said, look, I've gotten you to a good point. Like every quarter I would go in to see the surgeon. And after about a year, there was some overlap with the physical therapist. I went and I hired a professional master trainer at the gym. And I specifically hired the trainer for a series of 24 sessions to specifically go through and train what I needed to learn from there. My physical therapist was able to get me to, here you are as a normal person. And in order to get from where I was as a normal person, I then needed the additional professional assistance to make sure I didn't fuck this up. Because the last thing I wanted to do was be like, oh, PT's done, go out and bite, yay, everything's good, and then just tear it again. and I was terrified of that. And so the physical trainer, like actually, you know, getting the thing and then doing the time in the gym and doing the physical therapy was so important to my recovery. And so my best advice when people go and get injured is do the actual medical help, do the actual professional help. Because we're hobbyists, we're weekend warriors. We're not going to be able to figure this out ourselves unless you're really good at this.
I'm going to jump in really quickly with my quick story, which hopefully it's quick. Because we have a bunch more questions. And what I learned, so my knees were terrible until I got them rebuilt. But that did not keep me from fencing. So what I did was learned how to maximize my capabilities that I still had and minimize my problems. So in particular, I could not back up. Like that was just not going to happen. I just did not back up. And if I did, it was not good. So what I learned to do was 1, always advance. And then 2, make sure that I had a really good parry as doing so at the same time. So that minimized my need to back up, right? Because I was advancing and then trying to put the person offline while I was doing it. And also it worked really well for scaring the pants off of people, and they would usually back up for me. It was great. So my advice basically is for people that are injured is to not, much like Brigid said, don't re-injure yourself, right? Find new ways to make a new game for yourself. You don't have to have the same game over and over again. This is a long battle. This is a marathon we're in. You're going to have to learn some new ways of fighting over and over again. Does anyone want to talk about this, or I have another question?
Yeah, I would. My first injury just took time, because it was cracked ribs that led to neuropathy in my rib cage that was random. So I would have random pain on my sword side. The more recent one was a frozen shoulder due to a badly balanced sword and poor mechanics. And when I came back from that, talking about adapting your fight, I adapted my kit. Because I had so much issue with the heavier rapier I was using, I went to Darkwood and placed an order for literally the lightest thing I could fight with, which was one of their WMA foils with a simple cross hilt and a wheel pommel. And that thing is super light. It is super fast. It also preserved my shoulder for probably a good 2 years until I felt like it was strong enough that I could use it for other things. But it meant adjusting my entire fight, because with that cross hilt, there's no hand protection. So I had to figure out how to fight with that and be effective with that without getting my hand picked off every time. So it is a constant case of adaptation.
Right. Agreed. Okay, next question. As someone who practices almost every day to improve my skill and knowledge, it can be disheartening to hear some of the older fencers in my kingdom attribute my success only to my speed and youth. How can I positively influence that perception?
Beat them.
What? Beat them. Beat them. I like that. I like beat them.
Keep murdering them, and then also you don't have to like brag about it or humble brag, but like make it known. Like make blog posts saying, today I did this, today I did this work, today I did this work. You don't have to be like, look at me, I'm trying so fucking hard. But you can also just be like, here's what I'm doing today to make myself better, and just put it out there. You can also turn it into a thing to also help other people. Be like, I'm doing this. This is working for me. I'm doing this. This sure as hell ain't working for me, but I'm trying it anyway. Like, just, if nobody knows you're doing the work, they're not going to assume you're doing the work, especially if you look younger. Like, I still get the whole like, oh, but you're young and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but I was almost cut in half in a construction accident and I can't lunge or run. So like, a lot of good that does me. But it's okay because I bought a two-handed sword, and those actually just have instinctive prowess. You can ask a lot of people who lose fights.
It's magic.
That's where all the prowess is. You don't actually have to practice anymore. I have that on good authority.
Prowess USA.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so if you're rolling out of bed the morning of the tournament and beating people, without warming up, without having gone to practice that week, if you're just able to go out and murder people, yeah, well, they're going to attribute that to your youth and speed. But like Effingham says, if you can show, you start doing blog posts about your workouts, if you start showing your scholarship, your research, and yeah, they'll start to see, wow, this person really works hard for what they have.
I have another suggestion, which is beat them at their own game. So I am not a believer in youth and speed, as I am not youthy nor speedy. But I do like to fake people out. Like, so feints are my bread and butter. Like, I just love them so much. So personally, what I would just do is just play the game that they're playing. If they're playing a long game, if they're playing slow, if they're going for hands, whatever they're doing, just do it, and just do it better than they're doing it. And eventually they're going to have to shut up that it's youth and speed, right? If you are hitting them in the hand every single time, they can't really say that's youth and speed. They're going to have to say that you might have good targeting capability and they're not protecting their hands like they should. So I beat them at their own game. If you really want to get their so the other thought is don't give a crap what they think. That's the other option, right? Like, that is also another option. We see lots of happiness going on for people who can't see, but there is a lot of just not care. My favorite thing to do is just go out and win. And if people complain that I'm winning, oh well, get better and beat me. Brigid, you have your hand up.
So as the person on this group panel that was fencing when she was a teenager, I just didn't care. People were like, "Oh, you're fast." I'm like, whatever, I'm winning. And and so I just didn't care. Youth and speed only lasts for so long. And yeah, I wish I had known a lot better technique. I probably would have injured myself a lot less had I listened to people. But that would have been nice. But yeah, I was just like, you're jealous, rolled it off of me.
Anyone else, or we have another question? Etienne.
Real quick, I don't like bad-mouthing speed, but granted, I'm tall and left-handed and fast still. But the thing is that speed, there is raw speed, but there's also learned speed. There's efficiency. There's the practice that goes into delivering that bread and butter shot that you have thrown 10,000 times, that you know the range to the micrometer, and when the opening happens, your hand moves before anything else does. And people will say, "Oh my God, that's fast." No, that's practiced. So, I'm not going to discount someone just because they're fast.
Okay. So one of the other questions we got, though it has been somewhat answered, but in the chat, is what is more important, fighting in tournaments or more practice?
Both. Because you're working on two different things. I mean,
It's like saying
everything you learn in practice,
antifungal or antibiotics.
Yeah, everything you learn in practice is going to be translated into the tournament. So,
I mean, I care more when there's a tournament. Like when I go to a practice, I'm typically not working on winning. I'm working on a thing, and then I get out of that practice and go to a tournament. I'm not toying with the thing that I've been tinkering with. I'm there to win.
All right, so we are at 9:30 at this point. I said we'd give everyone about an hour, but I have one last question I would like to ask the group. And I told everyone this was going to ask at the beginning, but I'll ask it for the end. So we're in the time of COVID and we cannot stab each other as much as we want. So what is the one thing that you would tell our audience that they can do to get good at home while they're right now? 8-10.
Figure out that thing that you want to work on and work it. And even if you don't have an opponent, work through the mechanics of it. For instance, one of my motivators right now is I've spent my life fighting Onsteoran gunslinger. I'm tired of that. I want to fight Italian rapier. This means using a different sword. It means using different footwork. It means using different body mechanics. It means a whole lot of things that I can actually do without a training partner slowly, or with a tree or whatever, to work on those pieces so that when I can fight people again, I've got the framework.
Anyone else?
So the thing that I've been working on is figuring out my weaknesses. I have an arm weakness. Well, I have a forearm weakness that I have been trying to pin down the cause of, and I think what it is that I've been using a grip that's too big for my hand size. So I'm working on both strengthening that and trying to figure out if that's the actual cause. But look at your overall package and figure out where your weaknesses are and work on that. You know, I've been working on cardio since April because I had expected to go to Penzic and run in relays back and forth, and I know that one of my weaknesses is cardio. So I've been working on that and just figure out what you need to work on and go from there.
Very
good. So one of the things I frequently advise people to do is to watch fights. Like, if you were fighting in that fight that's happening right now on the list, what would you do against their guard? How would you fight them? And that's something we can do at home right now. There's a plethora of videos. I know from at least on tier, Godfrey von Ravensburg's been doing an enormous amount of posts over the years of videos, and several other kingdoms have their video monkeys too that like to post stuff. So I would, advise look at fighting and think about what you do. Think about how you'd fight them. Think about, what's your mindset.
Thomas, do you have anything?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of people that hate my personal views on this because I view drills as repetitive stress for repetitive stress injuries. I am also a mutant, much like McNish. I spend a lot of time just fantasizing in my head about different fencing scenarios, watching fencing videos of fights on YouTube, dissecting them, and just constantly wasting brain cycles on like what if scenarios for fencing. And seemingly for me, that is actually almost as good as doing drills is for some other people. Because every time I've tried to like button down and like do drills and give it an honest go, I end up in worse shape because of it somehow. I don't know how or why, it's just not fair. But like, I tend to spend way more time just dedicating brain cycles to kind of like fencing meditation almost.
There is some really good science about that, about imagery and fencing or any other sport and how much it really helps. So like that actually is a great answer. For me, my quick answer is that there is so much good content out there. We have some really amazing teachers out there that are teaching us how to do drills, how to do a lunge, all sorts of fun things. And I highly recommend that you take a part of that. I also want to add really quickly that the most important thing that you can do during this time is survive. Right. And that's what I want you to do more than anything else. If you can come out of this and still fence, great. That's really the most important thing. Survive the COVID, survive this pandemic. That's the most important thing. All right, we're going to go one last thing all the way around the room. What is your mantra? I don't know if I should say mine. So who wants to go first? All right, Effingham. I saw you smile. What's your mantra?
Because after the shit I've been talking, you're like, I don't know if I should say mine.
Mine's, all right, go ahead. All right, fine, Harry. I have 2 mantras. Mantra 1 is when my adrenaline is way too high, and that is be water. It's just to kind of like calm myself down. And then the rest of you all are smiling because you know what the one is when my adrenaline needs to go up, and that is, I'm going to kill you, motherfucker. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
All right, Effingham, you go. What's yours?
Okay, so I have my personal mantra as a fighter, and the mantra I have adopted as a person who has trained cadets and is training a cadet, and my spouse. My personal one is, you know, whoever is in front of me in the list is between me and my next meal. They need to die for that. And I also have this sort of idea that at least until I get better at actually teaching and doing things, I'm trying to overcome the mantra of that my cadets and my spouse get better at their pursuits in spite of me instead of because of me. Which currently, they do better in spite of me. I'm not always entirely helpful. I try, not always effective.
Sometimes you're helpful.
I'm working on that.
Okay. All right, next. Mercedes, what's your mantra?
Actually, I don't have one for fencing. My mantra for the rest of my SCA career is, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. But one thing that gets me through a lot of shit is you're a motherfucking master of defense. You can do this.
Excellent. Brigid.
So I have 2, and they're both kind of my philosophy on fighting, and they're distilled from Degrassi in a way. My first is doing nothing takes a time. And it's a thing I love to remind people, doing nothing takes a time. So if you are in range and doing nothing, your opponent is definitely doing something. And so being very aware of your measure and your opponent's measure is super important, and doing nothing during that period takes a time. So it's kind of like a rest in music. The song didn't stop, it continues on. My second one is the shortest line to the point. And that's, some people try and get way too complicated, and keeping your line nice and tight and closed and making it the shortest line to the point is the simplest we can get.
All right, Etienne, you got the last word.
All right, my mantra, when I take the field, it's always the same thought. This is my field, come and take it.
I like that one. That was a good
Plain
one.
and simple. And then the other is my motto, which is l'honneur d'être un cible, which is from Cyrano. It's the honor of being a target. And it actually refers to an officer's white scarf in the play. But I adopted it because ultimately I hope, a target for someone. You know, I want them to want what I've got, what I am. So
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Thank you guys so much for everyone listening. We are probably going to do this again on Tuesday, as some of the mods who wanted to participate weren't able to come today. So we're going to do it again on Tuesday. Again, thank you all for coming. Feel free to next time send an email or on Facebook, give us your questions and we'll be happy to talk. Thank you all. This has been great. I hope to stab you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.